Hi, welcome to reInvent at GPS Summit. This is GPS 209, and the session today is entitled How to Grow Your SaaS Business and Drive Revenue with AWS Marketplace. My name is Craig Wicks. I'm with a program called SaaS Factory, and we're in the partner organization. We provide benefits to partners and customers to accelerate their SaaS solutions on AWS. So more about that later. And we like to think ourselves as really the place for all things SaaS at AWS. And I'll be joined in this session by Mona Chadha, Director of Category Management for Marketplace. So a little bit more about our program. We help partners and customers really accelerate their journey on SaaS. And this is very much a business session, though. We've got lots of technical sessions and content, but I want to make sure everyone understands that we're going to be at the 200 level for the business content today. So we're not going to be diving into any concepts or architectural patterns or anything like that. There's lots of great content out there at reInvent and through AWS resources, you'll find it. And so if you're looking for SaaS architecture or background in AWS services or more on that, you're going to find it elsewhere, but not here. So here we're very much focused on the business side of SaaS and really talking about how to optimize your journey on AWS and in particular leveraging AWS Marketplace, right? So two objectives here. One, we want some context on really setting this SaaS market, what's happening today, and how do you optimize yourself in terms of leveraging what AWS has resources to really set yourself up for success. And then two, really understand the opportunity that AWS Marketplace represents and how to grow a successful business. And Mona will get into that portion of the presentation. And finally, just in terms of, who are you? We imagine this session is in particular importance to product and business leaders that are really building SaaS solutions on AWS or those that already have solutions on AWS, maybe even SaaS offerings or other offerings in the marketplace, and really are looking for best practices and how to get the most from the partnership that AWS provides and also tools and resources we provide through the partner program and also AWS Marketplace. So the pivot for this session is really one where we're going to be focused a little bit more on the go-to-market, really how does sales and marketing align to AWS Marketplace and how do you get that really moving like you should in terms of driving revenue. In the past, I've focused maybe more on the build side of SaaS and kind of the earlier stages, but here we're going to be much closer to the customer and much closer to sales and marketing in terms of how you align. So with that, I just want to move in the agenda. There's really two parts to the session, myself giving some context on SaaS in terms of the landscape and what's happening there, and then talking about SaaS Factory, our program. And then Mona will take over and go deep on AWS Marketplace and really look at that as a channel to successfully launch SaaS offerings and really drive revenue and expand your customer base and drive growth for your business. And then we'll end with some key takeaways from the session today. So SaaS in 2021, like what's really happening now? I'm old enough to remember the early days of SaaS. I was an early Salesforce user kind of around 2000. And I even wrote a paper called The Application Service Provider Market, where we looked at sort of this predecessor to SaaS. And now SaaS is really in its third decade. And it's fair to say that it's really permeated throughout the industry in terms of a preferred delivery mechanism for software and services and also what customers are really demanding. And so if you start to look at some of the trends now, the customer has spoken again, right? SaaS continues to accelerate, and data on this slide suggests that really organizations are looking for SaaS for any new applications now. There's some pockets where SaaS doesn't make sense, of course, but by and large, that's becoming the predominant delivery model. And this is all from IDC in terms of what's there, but nearly every segment is adopting SaaS and as a preferred model. And we really see software providers, and those are building SaaS solutions, moving even quicker here. Certainly, the last 18 months or so in terms of the pandemic has only increased this. So what's interesting about the SaaS model and the SaaS business model is it's been very resilient through this time. And initially in the March and kind of April 2020 timeframe, I think people were really trying to figure out what was happening. There was a good deal of churn in the SaaS business, right? So churn is a bad thing for SaaS businesses and a lot of other service businesses. But in that March-April timeframe, they really saw a lot of churn in their businesses. So there's a lot of concern. But since then, really we see the SaaS business only growing. And there's a lot of trends in the market that show that growth in terms of what's happening there. You only have to look at what's happening in the venture capital industry as well, too, to understand, sort of the opportunity to raise money in the SaaS model and similar business models there. But one of the things I want to highlight is we're really seeing a shift or transition in terms of how people are thinking about SaaS. And it's really shifting more from one that's really focused around the customer experience, right? We see that being a differentiator. And so it's not enough now to have SaaS solutions in market. You truly have to be differentiated. A Salesforce study called the Connected Customer really talks about how customer experience even trumps product features or capabilities, right? So users are really looking for a rich experience. And at least through our program, the conversation has kind of moved from, why should I do this? Does SaaS make sense to the business? To how? How do we do this? How do we do this more efficiently? How do we be more effective? How do we go from kind of good to great? And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So we've really seen the conversation shift across the industry. The SaaS Factory. So from the SaaS Factory floor, what I want to do in this next section is give you some perspective on our program and what we're learning as well too. So I'll kind of match resources with some examples we see out there that we've worked with directly. But this program began about 4 years ago and was announced almost to this day at reInvent in 2017. And we were a very small team then. We engaged directly with partners to help them transform and accelerate their business, their SaaS business on AWS. And we've grown during that time. Now we've built out the team a little further. We've built out a number of programs. What we have now is really something we like to think of as it's really your place for all SaaS on AWS. So if you're thinking about SaaS, we like to think of us as a really good starting point in terms of resources. Of course, there's lots of other teams that provide, great support to those that are building SaaS, but we love to think of our place as a good starting point. And there's kind of the really 3 pillars to our program. One, we're educators and evangelists and sharing knowledge. So, if you're looking to learn about SaaS, we believe we're a great starting point. So lots of content that our teams produce, white papers, case studies, and other articles that are out there are really designed to be education, right? And we go very technically too in terms of reference architectures of their materials to really provide sort of that next level of support. But that becomes a really key pillar of the program, and it's really always been there. The second is, we want to take some of that key content we developed and take it a step further and think about really ready-to-use resources. So reference architectures. Last year, we announced something called SaaS Boost, an open source reference environment. We also launched last year something called SaaS Lens, part of the well-architected framework. It really helps you sort of evaluate and consider all sorts of things when we're building and launching a SaaS application. And some of these are available on the console or even in GitHub as open source solutions. So we're going to continue more of that. And then finally, we've always had this model where we engage. We want to go deep with partners and customers and work to solve their problems and really use that experience to help thousands of partners we may be working with. And so 2 things I'd point to here, is our team will work directly with a number of partners and learn from them. But we've also launched now a SaaS competency in May of 2020. So we have 29 competency partners, consulting partners globally that are really aligned to our best practices. And we work to enable them and support them in what they do that really bring us a global reach as a program. So often as a goal of our program, we're talking about the need to move quickly. And partners really value us in terms of accelerant, in terms of bringing their solution to market quickly. But I thought I'd double click on this a little bit and talk a little bit more about why this is important. Maybe it's obvious to some, but I think there's some things in here that we can all kind of learn from. One, if you hearken back to the slide or look back at the slide that I presented earlier in terms of the market, your customers are ready. So SaaS has been established now for some time. And what this means is, key concepts around SaaS, including the business model, how people pay and consume that software, whether it be a subscription or consumption-based model, even getting comfortable with architectural approaches like multi-tenancy, those have already been established and others have done that for you. And so they've done part of your job. So you have a market that's truly ready and a very addressable market. Second, there's still a time to market advantage in some sectors. If you look at SaaS overall, about 40% is delivered in a SaaS model today, and about 60% is still delivered in very traditional means. So there's lots of opportunity out there for those that build SaaS solutions. And we see that being a little bit more specific in industry and verticalized, and sometimes you'll hear what's called micro SaaS. But certainly there's still a time to market advantage. And what we see generally is acquisition cost is going up too, and year over year. And so each year it's getting more expensive to really acquire those customers. And so there's still a time to market advantage and also a cost advantage of getting started today. Thirdly, our team likes to talk about really operating as a service, right? And so getting to that service point quickly, whether it be through an MVP or initial offering you have, it's really hard to have a dress rehearsal for running a service and having all those components of your business that are surrounding SaaS, be it development and operations and sort of the key sort of product management functions and sales and marketing need to really work cohesively in SaaS. And so, as soon as you can operate as a service, do that, because the learning and the flywheel really start then. The nice quote from CyberArk we had a chance to work with in terms of reducing their time to market by 30%. That's a really key goal for ours, and I just wanted to double click on the speed piece of it there. Next, I wanted to kind of dive into some resources we have and go a little deeper in terms of what's available there. The first is this AWS SaaS Factory Insights Hub. I think I mentioned it previously on another slide. And so a year or so ago, we had this idea, hey, let's bring all of our content and resources together in one place. And so that seems sort of obvious. I don't know why we didn't do it a long time ago. But what we did is we created an Insights Hub that's available on the SaaS Factory program page. There's now over 100 articles there. They run the gamut: business and technical articles, deep kind of 400 level content around architecture, best practices, case studies, videos, sessions like you see today, right, are available to you as well too. So really good resource to go, and we keep refreshing it. So we're adding about 5 to 10 new resources each month, and we really think there's great value in engaging with everyone around that content. It's a great way for our team to scale. You can also sign up for a subscription service there. So now every 4 to 6 weeks, we'll put an email in your inbox and said, here's what's new, or here's what's interesting from our team, right, as a resource. So we think that's a really great place to start, and a great place also in terms of just learning about SaaS. And there's something here for everyone. It's not all a beginner. There's certainly some more advanced concepts and technical concepts that we get into, but a great resource for us. And I'm kind of going through the columns of the SaaS Factory overview, if you will. And the second column, we talked about sort of reference tools and those things. And I wanted to highlight SaaS Boost. And this is a ready-to-use open source reference environment. We launched it for preview last year at reInvent, and then this last May of 2021, we made it generally available out there on GitHub. So you can go get it now, open source. And it really helps ISVs that have that traditional monolithic application move to SaaS, and really surrounding it by putting some of the building blocks of SaaS. So when you think about things like an installation, application configurator, admin, user management, UI for onboarding, tenant management, analytics, metric dashboards, billing and metering, what we want to do is really give you a head start there. We see these things as something that we call undifferentiated heavy lifting. This doesn't need to be unique to every SaaS provider. So this is available now on GitHub out there. It is an open source project, so we're very open and really that need to hear from the community in terms of driving that roadmap. And we'll continue to drive on enhancements and additional things we'll bring through SaaS Boost. So look forward to hearing from the community there. In this third category, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Competency Partners. So in May of 2020, we launched the SaaS Competency. And Competency is really a framework for building specific expertise across a number of domains at AWS and through the partner network. So there's competencies from financial services, security, industry and vertical, and horizontal specialties. So after many years and thinking through this, we built one specific to SaaS. And the way we've really built it is looking at builders and design services. So those that are really developing code, if you will, there's a place for you here. And also for those that are really more thinking about design and architecture. And many organizations also fall in both. And so some of the traditional consulting partners you'll see here, the likes of Slalom in North America, All Cloud in Europe, ComIT as well in APJ or Asia Pacific, So we've really been able to surround the globe with these partners, and we're actively looking for other consulting partners too. If you're the partner out there watching this presentation, you think that this fits in terms of your business and what you're doing, the SaaS competency would be a great place to go. We've seen also customers really get good outcomes. Many organizations are really struggle with engineering resources. They don't have a lot of extra people to put on that SaaS project or effort if it's something that's really outside of what current expertise or bandwidth for the team. And so bringing on that consulting partner or SaaS competency partner really adds to the mix and can really increase the velocity of what you're trying to do. So I wanted to explore a little bit on, hey, what can I learn from others that have been running on AWS, and what do they see in terms of benefits? And one of the things we did a few years ago was work with Forrester to develop a total economic impact study and really the value of running on AWS in a SaaS environment. And that got a little long in the tooth and needed to be updated. So we did that last year. And we looked at a number of organizations that were running really successful businesses on AWS. And there's some really interesting insights in here as well, too, I want to go through. The first was we really saw the time to develop a minimum viable product, move to an average of 12 months. So savings from 30 to 50% of what they saw traditionally, really relying on AWS tools to handle data storage and compute, through the development cycle. And so that was really a key finding. And I think it's something we see across customers too, not just those that are building SaaS solutions as well. Second, they could really expedite deployments, right, in terms of new geographies and leveraging AWS data centers and infrastructure. And this is where AWS Marketplace absolutely plays a role too. And we work with partners where they've been able to expand their customer base and geographies based on the presence we have in those markets that would have taken them, many months. And so, here we talk about the reduced time to availability from an average of 6 months down to 6 or 8 weeks. So significant reductions in terms of really being able to expand your customer base and go after those customers. Third, once that infrastructure was made available, partners still had to figure out some customized application environments. And, here they were able to leverage tools such as machine learning platform with SageMaker and really reducing that time to usage by as much as 96%. And then finally, what we saw is that, there was really a big benefit for development teams in terms of how they deploy and deploy much faster and be much more productive. And there was a savings about 1/6 the time with AWS services like Amazon ECS or Elastic Container Service as well. The other thing I want to highlight about this study too, and there's some really good quotes and pieces in there, and it's not a long piece, so it's very digestible, is we also build out some financials where we looked at organizations over a 5-year time horizon in terms of that initial build of that SaaS application and what things look like in terms of margin and revenue growth and things like that. So I think there's some really good benchmarking information if you're looking for that there, and that's available on the SaaS Factory Insights Hub. I invite everyone to kind of dive in and take a look at that as well. So next, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the partners we've had a chance to work with. And so these proof points, if you will. And so the first one I want to talk about is Cohesity. So Cohesity is in the storage and data management space. And last year, they launched an offering, data management as a service offering. And so we had a chance to work with them. They leveraged both AWS Marketplace and our program as well, too, and launched that in partnership with AWS last year. But what's interesting about Cohesity is kind of what they've done since that time, right? So this is initial SaaS offering. What's the momentum happening after that? They launched 2 additional services. But what I really like what Cohesity is doing is really focusing now on SaaS operations. So they've done things like really enhance the development process, really, and look at terms of how their development teams work and making them more productive. And so, that's really moved releases from weeks, now to months previously, really. So a big time savings there. The other thing that I really like what they did is they were really focused on metrics. So they really looked at how customers are using those applications to really make modifications, right, in terms of what they bring to customers, new features, new capabilities to drive new roadmap. So they really invested in those tools there. And the last thing that Cohesity really focused on was really getting that sales and marketing motion aligned to how they want to sell with AWS. And so they've done some great things there in terms of tying their systems together with Marketplace and ensuring that they're enabling the self-service and trial mechanisms that are there. So that's been some great work that we see with Cohesity, right, where they're not only getting to SaaS, but they're looking to get great at SaaS as well too. So an update there. The second one I want to highlight and talk about is Drumeo Cloud. So we worked with Drumeo just this last year, founded about 6 years ago. And Drumeo really enables queries directly on S3. And so they leverage Marketplace, and they directly leveraged our program to sort of build this out. And so, some interesting points about Drumeo. We had a chance to work directly with Tomer Shuran, who is one of the founders and really the product leader there. And he really leaned in and provided some great leadership for that team, and also really was really taking in a lot of the knowledge and things. Here's somebody that's been in the industry a long time, has been around analytics and SaaS and data in terms of the solutions, but really valued the support that our team provided. And to get specific kind of on the what they did within the business in terms of the SaaS operational footprint, they really looked at kind of their development team and looked to add things like site reliability engineering and also security specialists to that team. Now you're operating service, so those becomes key things for you too. And then really getting sales and marketing teams aligned around a product-led model, right? Where you're now building adoption around a product and building mechanisms to do that, and allowing customer success and other teams to drive on that, while your salespeople are further down in the funnel in terms of looking for really high quality leads. So there's a great blog out there on Drumeo. I invite everyone to kind of dive into it, but we really enjoyed working with them over the last year. So I want to talk about this good to great concept. I've maybe dropped a hint on this a few times in the presentation, but when we talk about getting to SaaS, that's no longer good enough. And so we really wanted to put a stake in the ground and talk about, what does great SaaS really mean? What does that look like? And so we've developed an ebook called Good to Great in terms of maximizing your SaaS solution. And so certainly speed's important, but how do you take it to the next level? And so there's an ebook out there that compares kind of that good to great across a number of different dimensions that we think are really important in the SaaS business. And I wanted to give you a highlight on a few of them here, and then invite you to go kind of dive in the ebook. The first one I'll talk about is nail it before you scale it. And this is really about a balancing act in terms of looking and thinking through the operational areas of SaaS. And I tried to point out some of those in terms of what Cohesity and Drumeo are doing in building their SaaS solutions. But we often find that organizations overlook that. There's really a focus on getting to market, and things around onboarding customers and billing are not completely thought through, and they really impact growth and scale. And so remember my point earlier about customer experience, right? And not being focused on that can be really a challenge here, particularly for organizations that have come from a traditional model where you're selling software to an individual, and you understand their wants and needs, but you don't really understand the needs of users or consumers of software like you have to in a SaaS model. And that becomes really important. So tools like journey mapping become important to really understand that experience and make sure you're aligned for it. The second one I'll point out is one that I know and love, and I love diving into this topic. I don't proclaim to be an expert, but the idea that pricing and packaging are never static, right? In reference to this and kind of doing some research for this presentation, I really love the stuff that OpenView puts out there, a venture capital firm that does a lot of research as well. They ran a study and they looked at 2,200 SaaS firms in terms of their pricing model and how they approached this, and ran a survey for some time. And the results were pretty startling, in that they looked at 2,200 firms, and they graded them on a 0 to 100 scale, but only 4% of those companies really had an excellent score. And further, 40% or 43% of companies actually had a failing score. So imagine teaching a class and 43% of the students were failing. Not good. As a teacher, you wouldn't feel good about that. So there's a lot of room for improvement in pricing and packaging. A recent example I want to point to that's fairly well known, I think, is New Relic. They have been really a SaaS company for many years, but in July of 2020, they really reset their pricing model and approach in terms of really going after a consumption-based model. They saw a lot of customers that really had a hard time getting started with New Relic because based on sort of how they positioned and packaged the subscriptions offering they had. So they went to this consumption-based model, and many in the organization call it one of the most pivotal moments in the industry, and they really benefited from that. And during that same time frame, they also had migrated to AWS in terms of a number of their applications there too. So a great case study out there with New Relic. There's both an AWS case study and other resources available too. So finally, I want to kind of talk about what's happening from a buyer perspective as well. And then I'll hand it off to Mona to really talk about the marketplace portion of this. But we certainly see buyers changing their behaviors around SaaS, and not only thinking about buying SaaS through that business model, but also thinking about channels that they're evaluating too. So this is some data from IDC in terms of talking about different channels in terms of where people are consuming software. And you certainly see that direct sales is very prevalent, company websites, so those direct models are really prominent, cloud service provider as well too. But you see cloud marketplaces now emerging really as this convenient, accessible channel for customers where they're aligned with their cloud provider already. And that has a lot of benefits that Mona will talk about in a minute. I'm old enough to remember multi-tier distribution models and distributors working with resellers and getting software out when it had to be delivered and packaged in some way. But look at sort of what's happening now is customers are really looking for this streamlined experience, right? And if you can't build it yourself, you should look for others that can really help you package this for you. And I would consider a marketplace really key in that way, where it can really help you accelerate and get to market faster and really deliver a great customer experience. So I know Mona is going to go a lot deeper on this, and I'll hand it over to her to go talk more about AWS Marketplace and the opportunities we see to build your SaaS business and go even faster. Mona?
Thanks, Craig. As Craig mentioned, SaaS is becoming the preferred model to build products, and increasingly, ISVs are leveraging cloud marketplaces as a channel to offer their SaaS-based solutions. And we see more and more customers, whether they're enterprises, small to medium-sized businesses, across different industries like healthcare and life sciences, financial services, media and entertainment, really coming to digital marketplaces to procure SaaS solutions in order to achieve faster time to market, deal acceleration, as well as accelerating their time to value. And analysts such as Gartner state that by 2023, 50% of applications sold via cloud marketplaces will be transacted in a more self-service way and without having to negotiate software terms and conditions. And by 2023, 75% of organizations will have comprehensive digital transformation implementation strategies that span across all facets of business, including procurement. And as organizations continue to innovate, IDC predicts that by 2024, marketplaces will become a dominant channel for procurement of infrastructure, operations, and software. And that's really critical. So those are software titles such as security, networking, storage, database, etc. So for all those reasons, cloud marketplaces are becoming a preferred channel, and also to really help accelerate your time to market and accelerate your deals. And this is how we envisioned AWS Marketplace. We really work backwards from the customer to really show how AWS Marketplace is transforming enterprises worldwide. And we see this really coming in from two different patterns. So the first pattern being from a CIO's perspective, in that CIOs are really focused on migrating their applications, their workloads to the cloud. And a lot of that comes with their third-party applications. And so as they consider that, they not only need their selection available in a cloud marketplace across all the different categories of software that they have, from security to networking to business applications to industry applications, but they also need to make sure that when they're migrating, they're able to have that management, governance, and compliance in place. And that means things like they're able to manage their IT budgets, their IT spends. They need the management and controls in terms of who has access to what software, also in terms of like their license distribution, as well as being able to, if they want to contract, if they need customized contracts, as well as customized terms and conditions, that they have that flexibility. And so, and also being able to provide that sort of speed and that speed and innovation to their builders. And so that's sort of the second pattern that we saw, is that CIOs have to manage that governance and compliance, working with procurement teams, legal teams, but then they also need to give their builders that flexibility to be able to build when they want. And so having that variety of selection available when they need it, but in a controlled way. And so as a result, we're not only helping enterprise customers have that availability of selection, having that control and that management of and governance, but we're also helping ISVs, and Marketplace has become a strategic channel for ISVs, data providers, and also resellers that allow them to really acquire new customers, migrate their existing customers to the cloud, and also overall grow their revenue. And one of the areas that Marketplace has done is we've innovated, and we continue to innovate. Innovation is really in our DNA at AWS. And in terms of SaaS, we really innovated not just a way in which ISVs can deploy their SaaS solutions, but we also gave them the flexibility to be able to contract how they want. And so we have different contracting vehicles for SaaS. For example, we have SaaS subscriptions, where ISVs can offer pay-as-you-go from a SaaS perspective. And also contracts, having the flexibility to have longer-term contracts, whether annual or multi-year. We've also innovated and have a hybrid of contracts and consumption models. So, for example, when an ISV or a customer has completed their contract period, they can then transition over to a pay-as-you-go. So we have all that flexibility that we provided in terms of contracting. Another thing that we offer is, from a SaaS perspective, is SaaS private offers. And from there, both the ISV and the enterprise can negotiate customized terms and conditions, as well as pricing, and do that in a more automated way and a self-service way. So for all those reasons, we really innovated SaaS on the SaaS front. And as a result of that, Forrester has recognized AWS Marketplace as a leader in their New Wave report. And that's not only because of us being able to streamline SaaS buying, but also being able to increase efficiency while lowering that risk for enterprise customers. And Marketplace is really transforming the enterprise digital supply chain. And we're not only doing that with offerings, software and data that you know and love from ISVs, such as security products from CrowdStrike, or business applications from Infor, or database type solutions, but we're also doing it. We're allowing enterprise customers to speed up their procurement, improving their overall governance, and they're optimizing their IT spend, and they're able to do that all from AWS Marketplace. But as we're talking to customers, one of the key things that customers has told us is that there's really 6 areas that we need in order to ensure that they're able to help them with this digital supply chain optimization. And those areas are having that software and data and services that they know and trust from vendors that they know and trust, such as CrowdStrike, Infor, Adobe, F5, Cisco, etc., across a variety of different categories. But also having that broad selection available in more modernized ways, in more modernized deployment mechanisms, such as SaaS, as well as containers and Kubernetes. And also making that transaction and procurement processes easier and faster, as well as enhancing governance and controls, and incorporating professional support and expertise that aligns to the software, and also optimizing IT spend. And so as we sort of look at all of this, this is how we've created AWS Marketplace as that curated digital catalog that really allows customers to find, subscribe to, deploy, and govern third-party software, services, and data. And we have over 12,000 transactable listings, of which 1,500 plus are SaaS focused. We have 2,000 plus ISVs with 2 million plus active subscriptions with more than 325,000 active customers. And these solutions are across 65 categories that range from security to monitoring, observability to database to AI ML solutions, as well as horizontal and vertical business applications. And so as we look across SaaS, we talked a lot about the different categories, and having that software selection available for enterprise customers is really critical, especially as we're looking to migrate to the cloud. Well, this is just a sprinkling of some of the selection that we have from vendors that you know and trust. For example, in security and observability, we have CrowdStrike and Splunk. In storage, Cohesity. This is a vendor that Craig spoke about earlier in the presentation. In networking, we have well-known vendors like Cisco, Citrix, F5, as well as business application providers such as Zoom, and analytics and AI ML. Drumeo is one ISV that Craig has spoken about, and also vertical industries such as healthcare and life sciences. So we have Change Healthcare and Lumina, life sciences with PerkinElmer, as well as media and entertainment from Kaltura, financial services. We have Experian, and also Seek, who's one ISV that we will be talking about later on in this presentation. They're an industrial manufacturing focused application provider. And so we have selection across all these variety of different SaaS solutions that really our customers know and love. And how is this working for ISVs? So we have a lot of SaaS ISVs that are building their business through AWS Marketplace, and we have great partnerships in place. For example, George Kurtz is the CEO of CrowdStrike. He often speaks about AWS and AWS Marketplace during his earnings calls, and he even has stated that with AWS Marketplace, he was able to cut the sales cycle down to almost 50%. Similarly, Snowflake talks about their cost savings and their ROI that they've achieved with over 405% ROI. And as a result of that, they're able to achieve that cost savings as well as increase in profitability. And so overall, seeing fantastic results as they are working and partnering with AWS Marketplace. And Sumo Logic is an ISV, a SaaS ISV, who has really leveraged Marketplace's go-to-market solutions and our go-to-market programs, which have really shown better ROI compared to the marketing programs that they've done by themselves. So overall, you can see how ISVs are really gaining traction with AWS Marketplace, and they're seeing results. And what that all boils down to is how they're able to achieve those results is that those faster transactions really mean that faster time to value. And that faster time to value, how we're able to achieve that is really by having simplified transactions. And what that means is, there's three key areas that allow for those simplified transactions. The first is having a fully transactable catalog, which is important to make sure that customers are able to transact and across all those different categories. We also have purchasing. Not only can you come to the AWS Marketplace website to purchase, but you can also find solutions, SaaS solutions in respective AWS service consoles such as EC2, S3, Redshift, Amazon SageMaker, EC2, and EKS. And so you now have different ways in which you can discover solutions in terms of where your personas are working, whether it's finding search on the publicly available website or a developer or builder in the actual AWS console. And the other area is that we have a broad range of pricing models. That ranges from bring your own license to pay as you go to more of a annualized or multi-year commitments. And we really provide those extensive contracting models to give our ISVs that flexibility. And we're not only providing that for ISVs, but also we really helped enterprises modernize their procurement in two key areas: private offers for both ISVs as well as consulting partners. And what private offers do, it really allows ISVs and enterprises to negotiate terms and conditions as well as pricing terms, and in a more automated and repeatable way. So what that allows is to really speed up that contracting time and getting faster time to value. And then the other area where we've really modernized procurement is around standardizing licensing terms. And that's important because you don't spend your time negotiating on terms and conditions. We've taken all that work and we've done it for you, where we now have consistent cloud terms and conditions that enterprise customers use as well as ISVs. And so for that reason, we have ISVs that are able to reduce their cycle time and by well over 50%, and also having these time savers like standardized license contracts and terms, and then having a repeatable and more automated way to provide private offers, which are customized typically and manually done. We're able to automate that and really streamline the procurement processes. And as we look at our flexible consumption and contract models, we have a wide variety across all the different deployments types, specifically SaaS. We have bring your own license that allows you to take a license that you may have already procured from an ISV, and you can now run that on an AWS instance. Or a free trial that allows you to try before you buy and before you make any sort of commitment to a contract. We also have pay-as-you-go in seconds and in hours, and this really allows you to not commit to a long-term contract, and you have that flexibility, as well as monthly and more time commitment focused contracts around annual and multi-year. And then finally, private offers. Private offers is a key way that many of our SaaS ISVs are able to provide that flexibility of, having the ability for self-service and with all these different contracting types, but then also there are going to be some enterprise customers that want customized terms and conditions and pricing. And so for that, we offer that flexibility of offering private offers and only providing that to those specific customers. And you're able to do that all on AWS Marketplace. All of these capabilities are offered through the marketplace. Another area is, this presentation is really focused on SaaS, but we do also on the marketplace have other ways that builders can flexibly build and deliver their solutions. We have Amazon Machine Images. If you have data sets, we also have AWS Data Exchange. We also have APIs that are available, which you could also deploy via AWS Gateway, API Gateway, as well as Amazon SageMaker. So if you have an algorithm or a model, you can package that up in a container and run it and deploy it through Amazon SageMaker, as well as containerized services that run in ECS, EKS, and also AWS Fargate. So we have a wide variety of different ways that builders can deploy their solutions. And also it's really critical as we're talking about SaaS and ISVs and building their products, it's also really critical to understand the buyer perspective. And I talked a little bit about this in the beginning of how we're really transforming the digital supply chain for enterprises. Well, a key part of that is managing compliance and really optimizing that while achieving governance and visibility. And I'll start with private marketplace. We've built several features for enterprise customers, and one of the key areas that's really helping these enterprise customers is private marketplace, which allows you to take a curated set of solutions from the AWS Marketplace. So from those 12,000 transactable listings, you can take a portion of those and put that into your own view and only expose a portion of that to your stakeholders. And that's what we call a private marketplace. What that allows you to do is optimize your IT spend, only providing that specific software to the right stakeholders at the right time. At the same time, we're not blocking your stakeholders from actually seeing what's available in the marketplace, but they can't actually purchase until you bring that back into the private marketplace. The other key area is around procurement system integration. And that's really important, especially with back-end systems like Coupa and Ariba and being able to integrate to those, as well as managed entitlements. What that allows you to do is manage your software licenses, distribution, as well as any sort of entitlement. It helps simplify entitlement tracking. And then, of course, cost tagging, which lets you monitor your AMI usage and your spend across AWS resources. And alignment and integration with AWS cost management tools such as CloudWatch, and then also the standardized licensing terms, which are these common set of cloud terms that enterprise customers need and that ISVs have also adopted. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about some customer case studies and some proof points around SaaS ISVs who are really seeing results with SaaS Factory, AWS SaaS Factory, as well as AWS Marketplace. And the first one is Couchbase, who is a database provider has a database application for enterprise customers. And what they needed to do was they had a challenge of needing to accelerate their development of their new application, Capella, which is a database as a service that runs on AWS. And so as they were looking at accelerating that development, they worked with the AWS SaaS Factory team and Marketplace team to really architect and design an application that was secure and that would securely manage their tens of thousands of AWS accounts. And as a result of that, working with both teams, they were able to improve their time to market by 30%, and they were able to improve their database setup time by 10x, which really allowed them to accelerate the rate of digital transformation for their customers. They were also able to scale this solution out globally in just a few clicks. And overall, working with AWS Marketplace, they were able to reach a new customer base, reach their existing developer customer base, and also be able to streamline customers' purchases in more of a repeatable and automated way. So for all that, the results that they've been achieving have been pretty phenomenal so far. The other ISV is Seek, and Seek is one that I work with a lot. Seek actually has an application that enables process manufacturers to rapidly investigate and share insights from various data sources, including data historians, industrial IoT platforms, AWS services, and other data sources that they may have. And what it does is it's a enhanced analytics application that leverages machine learning and data science to rapidly accelerate that time to insight. So for example, if you're in a manufacturing line, you may have data that comes from that line. It could tell you there's defects. How do you optimize that? This application would help. And then also could be you're running a clinical trial. How do you speed up that clinical trial? And having all these sources of data is really critical. And then Seek's application really allows you to extract those data insights into meaningful business decisions. And so what Seek's challenge is that they were spending a lot of time in the direct sales process, working with customers, working on billing, working on negotiating terms and conditions. And it was really taking up a lot of time, a lot of coordination, and it was really increasing their overall customer acquisition costs. And as a result, they worked very closely with the AWS Marketplace team, and they implemented private offers as well as incorporated standardized contracts, which allowed them to provide a customized way for them to provide pricing, custom terms and conditions, all in one, and do it in a more automated and streamlined way. So they were spending less time constructing their actual deals and more time with the customer, understanding what the customer wants so they can actually look forward to the next opportunity with that customer. They also had a chance to then really spend more time with the customer versus working on pricing and figuring out how do you actually get that contract out to the customer. Marketplace was able to do that very quickly, and then with customized terms and conditions, they weren't spending a lot of time with legal teams negotiating T's and C's, which we all know can be time consuming. So that in itself was a solution that they implemented, and as a result of that, they accelerated their deal velocity and improved and spent more time with their customer. And overall, they improved their sales cycle down from 4 months to under 2 months, which really allowed them to then, like I said, focus more on the customer, accelerate their time to contract and their time to value. They were overall able to get more customers through AWS Marketplace and also meet more with an IT persona, which is a persona that they actually typically didn't have access to. So overall, Seek is seeing a ton of really good business results with AWS Marketplace, and they're also working with the SaaS Factory team. And some of the key takeaways, we talked about how AWS SaaS Factory and AWS Marketplace are really helping SaaS ISVs build their businesses and go faster, increasing their time to value, accelerating their opportunities, and accelerating their time to market. And as Craig mentioned earlier in the session, we really see the SaaS market maturing, and it's becoming the standard for building new applications, really across a whole number of segments. And really the pandemic has really accelerated that trend. And so also people's expectations have gone up in that regard. And so the SaaS Factory has really, in that way, Craig shared, ways in which partners are successful and how they're leveraging AWS services, and they're seeing great outcomes in delivering to their customers. And then, I spoke about AWS Marketplace and how that offers that flexibility for partners to drive their go-to-market, spent time talking about what enterprise customers are looking for, and then the availability of selection, contracting vehicles that are available to ISVs, and the capabilities that we have around private offers, as well as being able to discover and find solutions, whether it's on our publicly available website or through AWS consoles. But really having that depth and breadth is really important. And below we have links where you can learn more about both Marketplace and SaaS Factory. So check those out. And also there's additional sessions that are available during reInvent, and there's a reInvent website, so please check out additional sessions there. But the ones that we have here are not only sessions, but they're also workshops and chalk talks that really help you build your SaaS application. And with that, on behalf of Craig and myself, thank you. Thanks for your time. We hope you found this session insightful, and have a great day.